following up on the topic of encephalomyelitis. So as you know, we talk a lot about this organism, E. cuniculi, encephalomyelitis cuniculi. So that is just one pathogen, which is a very prevalent pathogen that exists in our rabbits around the world. And as a matter of fact, it's been studied and determined, or estimated rather, that anywhere from 52% to upwards of 85% of domestic rabbits worldwide, depending on the region, by the way. It does vary per geographical area of the world where it's been studied, but that is a very wide range, and that indicates seroprevalence in our rabbits. So being that the rabbit who is the host of this organism, the E. cuniculi organism, or EC for short, they are seropositive for it. So in essence, they are a host carrier of the organism, which may or may not mean that it'll manifest into the disease caused by EC, encephalomyelitis, at any point in their life. So a rabbit can be a carrier, EC positive, for the organism itself. They can be carriers their entire lives, and they may never show signs of clinical or subclinical symptoms caused by the organism itself. However, at any point in their life, if something were to occur, such as something even like a stressful event or trigger, that occurs in the rabbit's life, as well as any underlying health condition, something that exists in the rabbit's body that perhaps is suppressing their immune system to the point where the E. cuniculi organism, which is quote unquote dormant, so it's literally dormant, living in the host rabbit. They were either probably born with it or contracted it through inhalation or ingestion of an infected rabbit's urine, or from the environment perhaps. These are kinds of the ways that it's transmissible to a rabbit. So if they were EC positive and never showed signs until a certain point in their lives, it's quite possible that one, the EC organism did in fact activate, becoming in an active infection where its spores end up replicating and rupturing inside the host cells. And then that translates or manifests into the disease and the symptoms that we see outwardly, such as head tilt, such as vestibular disease, neurological problems, such as, nystagmus, which is the involuntary movement of the eyes, falling, rolling, things of that nature. And there could be other clinical presentations as well, such as renal disease. So E. cuniculi infects multiple organs in a rabbit's body. It is quite a serious pathogen because it is a multisystemic disease. It is a host, or it is an organism rather, that has the capacity to spread throughout a rabbit's body if unmitigated, if unchecked, whether it's from medical treatment through the use of the drugs that we recommend in the group, or through the rabbit's immune system. If they're no longer able to check the organism because it's gotten out of control, the immune system has now been suppressed through for some other reason, some cause that depressed the rabbit's immune system, that means that EC is no longer in check by the immune system of the host and has now spread. It's replicated, it's infecting certain organs. It actually starts in the kidney, very commonly in the kidneys, also to the liver, to the lungs. Then in more advanced stages of the disease, it infects and attacks the brain, CNS, primarily, and even the eyes. There's ocular presentations of E. cuniculi, as you've learned in the group as well, or maybe through your own experience, where a rabbit would rapidly develop a cataract or uveitis in an eye or both eyes, perhaps. That is another clinical presentation of E. cuniculi. And so there are just a number of ways that it could present itself. There are a number of, just explanations and correlations between the organism, EC organism, and these clinical symptoms that we see a lot in the group. So that's why it's actually, you know, necessary to even presume. We assume a lot, right? We assume a lot in the group that a number of the neurological symptoms of a lot of the rabbits that come into the group are caused, perhaps whether directly or indirectly, by E. cuniculi. It's a safe assumption. We shouldn't automatically act as if it is the cause every single time. Why? Because there are literally a dozen of other reasons why a rabbit can develop neurological symptoms that's not just EC related or caused by EC. There are a number of other reasons why. There are a number of other causes that have to be investigated by a rabbit savvy veterinarian. That's why we need people to actually get access to a vet as soon as possible the second that they see any of these symptoms that you know, mirror or reflect E. cuniculi or any other disease for that matter. Super important to go straight to the most rabbit savvy vet you can get access to as soon as you can, in order to appropriately diagnose, make sure that they do a neurological exam, physical exam, checking everything possible, including the ears, you know, and that could be through diagnostics, blood work, imaging, especially, you know, any other method that could help a veterinarian as closely diagnose as they possibly can what the underlying causes of the clinical symptoms that we see in a rabbit. As you know, and I actually said this in my first video, that E. cuniculi is quite difficult to diagnose in a bunny. The diagnostics that exist now, meaning, you know, the closest we can get to really pinpointing whether a rabbit is seropositive for EC is to have a serology test done, which is an E. cuniculi serological titer panel, you know, to detect antibodies. That is an expensive test. And it's actually not quite conclusive. And I know you see a lot in the group, oh, you know, it's not accurate, it's not accurate. Well, it's not exactly because it's inaccurate, it's because it's difficult to interpret. There's a range of interpretation methods, if you will, and really a vet really has to understand how to interpret these test results. And it's quite difficult, and primarily because that serological test is not diagnostic in nature. What it does is it helps us know whether a rabbit has at least been exposed at some point in their life to the E. cuniculi organism. There are ways to interpret the diagnostic results through IgG and IgM antibody, like the quantitative measures, if you will, to kind of understand the likelihood, the probability of the stage of infection and the disease itself. And there is a table that I could share with the group, but, you know, knowing, you know, if they're positive with one and negative in the other, or if they're both positive or they're both negative, there's just ways of interpreting it. It just ends up being difficult to interpret. It's not so much that it's inaccurate, although there could certainly be errors in sample collecting and in the way that the lab analyzes it. Sure, there is always room for error. It's my understanding it's quite low because there are very specific labs that actually process and analyze the E. cuniculi serology test. So, but that's not to say it doesn't ever happen. But really it's a matter of interpretation, not that they're inaccurate, but they're inaccurate in the sense that it doesn't tell us the full story and whether or not the current clinical symptoms are directly caused by the detected organism. So if a rabbit's EC positive and the test result says, oh, you know, they're positive for E. cuniculi, that's great. But does it really explain or rather confidently diagnose or determine that the organism is causing XYZ symptom? You know, maybe it's causing the vestibular disease, but it's not actually causing the head tilt. So an explanation there could be, well, this rabbit also was diagnosed with inner ear disease. A vet determined through a CAT scan, maybe even through radiographs, even though, it's a little, it can be difficult to do with x-rays, but it can be done. You can detect middle ear disease, particularly through an x-ray if the contrast is exists, and you can see unilateral or even bilateral middle ear disease. Inner ear disease, a CAT scan would be the ideal form of advanced imaging to really confidently rule out or confirm inner ear infection. So say that was done. Well, then what that could mean is that that rabbit has inner ear disease and seropositive for E. cuniculi. And it's possible that E. cuniculi is causing maybe one or two of the symptoms, and inner ear disease is causing the peripheral vestibular disease component of the rabbit's whole host of symptoms that they're showing to us. So it's very possible that the rabbit could actually have both.